So last year I revisited Coraline, taking a look at its handheld counterpart and being pleasantly surprised that it wasn't some cheap minigame collection or something. Instead, it accurately followed the events of the movie, only now you as the player are the one guiding Coraline through the adventure. There's only about a handful of minigames, but they all come at appropriate times and fit within the context of the story. Unlike the console versions that really go overboard with the amount of random things added for no other reason than extending the game's length. But after giving Coraline a second chance with its DS version, it got me thinking about another kids horror game based on a film that I covered quite a while ago. Before I reviewed Coraline on the PS2 in 2019, the year before that I did a review on Monster House, where I was an unreasonably angry 18-year-old playing this game for the first time. It is by far one of the most uninspired games I've ever played in my life, and that is not an exaggeration. I haven't played the PS2 version since that video, but just like with Coraline, this wasn't the only version of the game created. Monster House also got its own release on the DS, and with this being the mid-2000s, it was old enough to get another version released on the Game Boy Advance, which is the main topic of this video. But for the sake of tying up loose ends, let's quickly take a look at the DS game and discover if either of these handheld ports had possibly been overshadowed by its main console release. So first up is the DS game, which is pretty much a simple top-down perspective shoot 'em up. The game starts with the characters just casually walking into the house, and what follows is a series of levels where you shoot multiple waves of possessed furniture until the game says you won. There's absolutely no exploration, as each level takes place in a single room, or multiple ones that you run through in a single path. You get to choose your character at the start of each level, but there's not really any major differences in playstyle. DJ and Jenny are basically identical, with Charter having a larger spread at the cost of a lower rate of fire. There doesn't seem to be any kind of objectives other than killing all enemies from what I played. Although there was one level where I had to defend the police guy, but even then it's just kill everything. Oh yeah, check out these character models by the way. They actually look worse than the PS1 Hagrid meme. So yeah, I didn't really feel like finishing this one. And you know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it gets better at some point during its 3-hour length. But somehow I doubt it. Moving on to the main event, we have the Game Boy Advance version, and I'm already giving it a point for the simple fact that now we have some nice 2D pixel art to look at. First impressions is that the game feels very similar to The Legend of Zelda, but what is this? We've got multiple floors, each with their own map defined, including save rooms, finding certain items and upgrades to progress to new areas, hidden passageways and cryptic puzzles. This is a textbook Metroidvania we're dealing with here. So after 2 games on better hardware, limited to a level-based structure with very basic gameplay mechanics, we finally found the dream Monster House game. A house you can actually explore and get lost in as you discover secrets and try to piece together what you need to move forward. It's weird because all 3 versions were created by the same developer, but it seems like all the care went mostly to the GBA. Maybe it's because this game's lead designer was a rising star who went on to be one of the directors for Dead by Daylight, and now a senior creative director at the same company responsible for the new Silent Hill Ascension. But that's all just speculation on my part. The game starts off with the main trio being pulled into the house, and once inside they lose all of their equipment which they have to go and recover. Can you tell this is supposed to be a Metroidvania yet? Another major difference with this version is that you can switch between every character on the fly, each having their own water guns, abilities, and maximum health. Just like with the PS2 game, you find a radio that lets you talk to Skull, but it seems like this idea was originally designed for the GBA version, since he'll remind the player on what the current objective is. With this being a 6-hour open world adventure, you'll probably not beat in one sitting. Having Skull giving his supernatural expertise and advice to the kids is definitely useful for this game. Outside of exploring the house, dealing with possessed furniture, and solving puzzles, it's clear that this game implements some survival horror elements that puts on an extra layer of challenge. It captures that classic Resident Evil feeling of desperately trying to reach the nearest save room before dying, meaning that you're pretty much always going to be playing the game cautiously to avoid taking any unnecessary damage. Adding to the survival horror mechanics is the fact that your water guns will actually run out and can't just magically reload like the other games. You can always do a light burst, but the far more effective full beam will drain your water meter, and you can only replenish it by picking up water droplets in the environment or filling up at a sink in the save room. Eventually, through exploring optional areas, areas you can find water bottles to hold in your inventory. These will fully restore your meter, but are only one-time uses that also need to be refilled. All 3 characters have their own water gun upgrades that you really need to go out of your way to find, as well as 2 unique special abilities that are necessary to progress through the game and backtrack to find other hidden secrets. These abilities can also be used as support weapons, such as Jenny with her slingshot, or Charter with his water balloons, but since you only get a limited amount, you have to use them sparingly for when you definitely need them to open a new area. Each character gets used fairly often, but I find myself using Jenny the most since she has the fastest movement speed, and I ended up finding all of her water pistol upgrades. DJ's camera can instantly stun every enemy in the room, making him useful for taking on large groups, and Charter's charge shot makes him the best for dealing heavy damage up close. Enemy variety is pretty much the same as the other games as you fight different types of possessed furniture, including a tougher version of each. The only outliers are random bees that all seem to live in the walls of the house. Speaking of which, the house itself feels more like a mansion as you explore the main floors, the attic, 3 separate basements, and the furnace. Every time you reach a new floor, it's vital to look for its corresponding map in order to find the save rooms and see which areas have been unchecked. On the other hand, it doesn't remind you which doors were locked or if there was something you overlooked, which is kind of surprising for a kids game. There's very little hand holding aside from occasional hints from Skull, making this game actually pretty challenging at times. You know, I'm gonna have to admit, being a Metroidvania expert myself, even I had to resort to looking at a walkthrough. More than once. Another important part of your inventory is the candy box that lets you hold up to 4 healing items that can only be found in chests, making them a scarce resource. But only being able to carry 4 at a time can create a bit of a dilemma. Whenever I have the maximum amount, sometimes I have to think about whether I should use a piece of candy or not before opening a chest. It's not like in Resident Evil where it'll tell you your inventory is full so you can't pick it up. Instead, it will replace an item in your candy box, meaning that one of them was just wasted. One more slightly annoying design choice was the implementation of the dash move. On the surface, yeah, it makes sense during combat to have the ability to evade. However, with the GBA's limited inputs, it's mapped to double tapping on the D-pad, which very frequently leads to it being used more by accident than anything. Navigating tight walkways and moving platforms is made a lot trickier than it needs to be. It's tough because the only realistic idea I could think of would be to map the dash on the L button, but that would mean losing on-the-fly character switching and possibly having to go into the menus far more often than you already have to. I'm sure it's something the devs thought about a lot, but at the end of the day, this was probably their best option despite some drawbacks. It's around about the halfway point where the game really starts to open up as you repair the elevator that lets you freely travel to most of the floors. From here you need to find 3 pieces of a brass heart to open the main door into the furnace. These are all locked behind boss fights that keep getting progressively harder, but that doesn't stop them from mostly being lazy redesigns at the same time. So throughout the whole game you fight constants 3 separate times, once after you find the gear for the elevator and before you collect the second and third pieces of the brass heart. The only difference gameplay wise is that now she moves faster and throws out more candles that you have to shoot before you can deal any damage to her. Again, this is why Jenny gets used the most since she moves the quickest and has the best rate of fire and water capacity. The only other boss fights are against a carpet monster that tries to kill you from fall damage and the final boss against the furnace itself. Before going in, we get a cool cutscene with Nevercracker, who was just chilling in the basement for the whole game, I guess. This is the only version that features him, and despite it mainly just recycling lines from the movie, it's a nice addition since just like in the film, he does play a small part in helping destroy the house. After one last mission to grab the dynamite, we go up against the big furnace. At first I struggled a bit with the whole floor seemingly dealing damage, but soon enough I discovered the boss only had 2 attack patterns, making it a piece of cake on the second attempt. After placing the dynamite, the only thing left is to go on a big escape sequence back to the front door, and by shooting the uvula, the trio all manage to escape just before the house explodes right in the middle of the street. And then, just like that, it was all over. Or is it? Hard mode unlocked. Okay, yeah, no thanks, I'm good. Oh, a secret door. I wonder what that could be. Yo, Nevercracker's been a gamer this whole time. So that explains why he never leaves his house. Getting to play Thou Art Dead as a bonus game is pretty neat, and it seems like this one plays a lot similar to the one we see in the movie compared to the console version equivalent. So that was Monster House for the Game Boy Advance. I gotta say, it was pretty fun getting to revisit this film I've enjoyed since it first came out, and finally experiencing a tiny high-end game that combines this world with a suitable genre, one that makes sense. At this point, I'm glad we get to wrap up this mini saga of movie-based kids horror games, with easily the best one I've played so far. And with that being said, thanks for watching. Bye guys.